Today I'm going to be talking to you about therapy and how therapy has helped me heal and the different types of therapy out there. So therapy can be very scary for people that have never done any therapy at all. Like sometimes you hear, oh, I need to have something wrong with me to be able to go through therapy. But I think it's just helpful to have someone to talk to that you can be vulnerable with, right? Like let's say you've been abused or, in my case, like I was hit by my father a lot. Having a therapist can help you be able to heal your past and be able to move on from that. I'll share with you a couple different stories on and then I'll explain the different types of therapy that I have taken. Obviously, do your own research. Keep in mind, I'm not a therapist or anything like that. I'm just someone that has gone through a lot of therapy, and I'm also helping people with mental health in terms of more mindset, more coaching related. So I'm not certified as a therapist, so just wanted to put that disclaimer out there, so don't sue me or anything like that. Well, first I'll share with you why I started going to therapy, and then I'll share with you some of the benefits and what I have learned from going through therapy. The reason why I started going to therapy was because, well, luckily my health insurance paid for therapy back then. So this is when I worked for a company that used TriNet, which is the company I ended up working for, but that's another story. You have a number in the back of the health insurance card that you call, and they call it like behavioral health, right? So I called and then they said, hey, there's an opening at this place called Blatt & Peel Institute, which is in Manhattan. There was a much older gentleman. He's like a classically trained therapist. So the title is, well, licensed clinical social worker. That's the designation in the US that we use. So you want to make sure they have that, because that means that they are trained. You want to hire a CPA that is trained, or someone that is a CFA, right? You want to make sure that they're certified, because that means they went through rigorous benchmarks and they have a code of ethics and things like that. But I went to therapy because I had a lot of anxiety and depression, and I wasn't able to sleep a lot. And therapy helped me be able to just have someone to talk to. So I'm not gonna lie, like my first therapist was like really good at certain things, but he was a bit older. So eventually, over the course of 7 years, I used like 6 or 7 different therapists. And I'll kind of explain the differences between most of them. So cognitive behavioral therapy is the most common type of therapy, and that's more like talk therapy, right? Where they use psychology to analyze like where you're at, and if you're if you're bipolar, or if you have something, like they have a book that they're trained in. So my guess, I would recommend that for people who are just starting off. But I would say the most impactful therapies I've done is called EMDR. The EMDR has to do with your eye movement. So think of it as like hypnosis, but they're getting to your unconscious. Right? So when I do EMDR, they have a pen where they go back and forth, back and forth. It's a pendulum, anything that's like a metronome, right? Because then you're going to your subconscious. How it works is you have a clicker as well. So when the light is going left, you click, right? So it keeps you, instead of like being in your head, because when you tap into your subconscious, your unconscious, you're able to just go to a much deeper level instead of just talking about surface level stuff, right? Like let's just say my surface level stuff is like, my wife made me angry because she yelled at me, and and I don't like it when she yells at me, right? That's like surface level. When you go to the unconscious, which is what EMDR does, it's like, okay, well, why, what about that triggers you? It's like, oh, okay. And then I teleport back to when I was in 7th grade. I lost my school uniform. I came back, my mom yelled at me and she said, Davidson, or she said Day, which is my Vietnamese name. And then she would just scream at me, and I felt like a loser. I felt like a worthless piece of shit because she was working hard doing nails for a living. So now I'm actually able to go to my subconscious. So now I know every time my wife yells at me, I'm like, oh, I'm going back to like 7-year-old Davidson, and I don't get triggered as much, right? EMDR, I think, is the most effective if you want to go really deep into your subconscious. There's something called a commitment and acceptance therapy as well, which I would recommend. And that therapy is around accepting yourself, right? Like not beating yourself up, like actually having acceptance, like let's say your parents are divorced, accepting that happened, right? Instead of pretending like it didn't happen. Once we accept things, then we're able to finally move on. Like we don't ever truly move on, right? That's the tricky thing with a lot of these things. But at least we have more awareness and we're able to choose a different path, right? Instead of me being like, oh, like I'm never gonna get married because marriage sucks, and why would you bring kids to this cruel world, right? That was my story. Like, is that that actually the truth, or is that just something that happened and I think the world is hard? Okay, well, let me unpack that a little bit more, right? So acceptance therapy will help you be able to like accept the good, the bad, and just reality, right? And then what am I committed to, right? So let's say I'm committed to love and like expression and healing, and I'm committed to being an amazing husband, right? Well, then I can act in my commitments instead of being in fight or flight mode, right? Which is, let's just say my wife is really vulnerable and she's crying and I'm like, I don't know what to do, right? But so I can choose like, oh, should I hug her or should I try to give her advice? Or should I just shut up and listen? This will help me be able to just shut up and listen and not give advice. Because like at the end of the day, like if she wants advice, she'll go to her friend. She's not going to ask her husband for advice. You know what I mean? Those are the 3 types of therapy that I would recommend to start. There's a lot of resources on psychology today. You want to look up different therapists. Everyone has different titles. There's a lot of therapists that have marriage counseling as well. There's couples therapy as well, which we've done in the past. And the unique thing about couples therapy is that you're able to repeat what the wife is saying. Well, you know, the spouse is saying, right? So if she's saying like, hey, I don't think he understands like how hard it is for me to work, right? Like during fashion week, it's like really stressful for me, you know? So instead of me like judging me, like being like, well, you don't know how hard is it to be in sales. Like I'm making calls all day. People are hanging up on my ass, right? It's like, okay, clearly we're not going to make any progress. Like let's stop it right now. So the therapist would be like, okay, Davison, did you hear what Samantha had to say? And then there's a 5-step framework, right? I would listen to what she says and I repeat, and I would say, hey babe, it sounds like, you know, you've been super stressed out at work because you're working a lot of hours. So that's the first step, like the words. The second step is the emotion, right? So like, what is she feeling? Like, I'm invalidating your stress, or it sounds like I'm not listening to you vent, like I'm giving you advice instead, and you don't like that, right? And then you confirm, so that's the third step. Is that, am I hearing you correctly? And she's like, yeah, like exactly. You know, like I feel like you're just giving me advice when I'm not asking for it, right? Those are the steps that will help. And then vice versa, she'll do the same with me, right? So the therapist will help guide you along the way. So I would honestly really recommend couples therapy. A lot of people do struggle with a lot of these communication issues. And then the 4th step, apologizing, right? Or owning up, like taking responsibility, right? So like in the past, you know, instead of making excuses like, hey, I'm super stressed out too, that's why I yelled at you. Okay, and then the 5th part is, this is my commitment moving forward, right? So it's like, hey babe, like I know you don't like it when I give advice. You know, I can't promise you that I'll never give you advice ever again, but at least next time, you know, what I can promise is I'll listen to you and I'll just shut up and, you know, I'll just hug you. Is that what you want? Right? And then you confirm it, and then you hug your wife. Some of the things that I've learned from therapy, if you have any other questions, feel free to post below. If you like this, like it, subscribe, share it with your friends or people who you know that are struggling with similar types of things. I'll leave you guys with this, right? It's super scary to talk to someone who you don't know, but it's also really freeing, right? Because they have a confidentiality agreement. So if you talk to your friend, like technically your friend can just like tell someone else, and like, yeah, that could end badly. But with a therapist, like they literally like contractually cannot say anything that you're saying to them to someone else, unless you're like suicidal. Then by law they have to be able to report that. There's definitely a lot of value in hiring a therapist. In summary, I think I'd say like my 5 main points in hiring a therapy is: hire a therapist if you're feeling like you have a lot of anxiety, like you're hard on yourself, if you feel yourself comparing yourself to others, if you haven't spoken with your family in a while, or if you feel isolated. Those are the 5 things that I was feeling when I started therapy. And then I would say like the 5 benefits therapy has helped me with is: 1, like just more confidence, like 2, trust, like I'm able to trust people, 3, I'm able to make more money because like I love myself more and I know I'm capable of a lot more. 4 is being able to like just have better relationships, right? Like being able to listen to someone better, being able to like support someone. And then number 5, like from a psychology standpoint, right? You're able to understand a lot more about yourself, and because of that self-awareness, you'll be able to have deeper relationships. You're also able to be more self-actualized. Like you're actually able to find what your fulfillment, what your joy is, because you're not like in fight or flight mode, but you're actually able to be more creative as well. So if you guys have any questions on therapy, post below. Once again, I'm not a therapist, so don't don't sue me or anything like that. But I just wanted to share stories about how therapy has helped me. And stay blessed, my friends.